Chapter 7, Part 2. So in the first half of the chapter, we looked at learning in terms of classical conditioning and operant conditioning, which is essentially the pairing of two events, a stimulus and a consequence, or an association of two events happening, a behavior and a consequence, right? And in both of those situations, the behavior is either strengthened or weakened based on the consequence, right? So now we're going to look at social cognitive theory, which is Bandura's social learning theory, which is a little bit different, okay? Bandura's social cognitive theory states that social, cognitive, and behavioral factors play important roles in learning, as opposed to it being just based on a behavior and a consequence. So there's three factors here. Cognitive factors are students' expectations, beliefs, attitudes, self-efficacy towards something. Okay, so let's just say a math test, for example. The cognitive aspects are, what are your expectations about the math test? Do you think you can do well? Do you think you're prepared? Do you feel like you're good at math? Those types of elements. Social factors involve the students' observations about teachers, like people like teachers and parents. There. I just paused to make that a little bit more clear in the slide. So the social factors are students' observations of the achievement behavior of people around them. Their parents, predominantly their parents, friends, teachers, just their social environment around them. And then finally, there's behavioral factors. Behavioral factors is best explained by giving an example, right? So your behavior before the test. If your behavior before the test was that you studied very hard, and because you studied, you got an A, that is going to influence your cognitive factors in the future. So now you're going to have more confidence. You're going to have, which is up here with students' expectations, beliefs, and attitude. So you're going to have more confidence in your abilities in math and your abilities to study. You're going to believe that maybe next time you can also get an A, and you're going to have a more positive attitude towards math, towards school perhaps, and towards yourself, right? So these three work, reciprocal determinism, in relation to each other. It's interactive between the three elements, and they're all working together to demonstrate, as important influences in human learning. Another theory by Bandura is observational learning. So again, previously and up until this time, psychologists thought learning was due to operant and classical conditioning. Now a little bit, getting in about Bandura's social cognitive theory, but still, in all of those things, in all of those theories, the person was directly involved in the learning process and was directly involved in receiving the consequence, whether that was a reward or a punishment. So observational learning, which seems obvious to us now, at the time was a big deal, because for the first time, Bandura was saying the person does not have to receive the consequence or the reward themselves. They can see someone else engage in that behavior and see them get a reward or a consequence and learn that way. So 4 key processes that are involved in observational learning for the learning to take place. Attention. So students must attend to what the model is doing or saying. Okay. Again, seems obvious, but if they're not attending to it because it's not engaging, right? It has to be engaging. It has to be attention worthy. Some examples that are given: students people in general tend to pay more attention to, say, high status models, For example, if, a commercial, you'll see a commercial. If it's got a famous person, you pay more attention to it than it does if it's just some random person, right? Models that are attractive, models that are powerful. There are characteristics that make the models get more attention, okay? Retention, students must code information and keep it at memory so that they can retrieve it. Retention is improved with vivid, logical, clear demonstration. So the example given is Sesame Street. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sesame Street or other kids' TV shows, right? So they're very, very colorful and vivid, and they do have very clear demonstrations. And the idea behind that also is so that youth will retain the information and code it so that they can retrieve it later. Production, students must be mentally, physically able to reproduce the model's behavior, right? They have to be able to do it physically and mentally. Motivation, students must be motivated to imitate the model behavior. So I found a video here for you that really makes it clear. You said in class that you had heard of the Bobo doll demonstration. This is just a quick little video that explains it a little bit further. Just one second here. There we go.
It's 1961. You're wandering around Stanford University looking for a sandwich or something when you happen to walk by a particular room in a particular lab and see something a little unnerving. Namely, you find a woman punching an inflatable clown named Bobo in the neck. Over and over in its neck. This was the lab of legendary psychologist Albert Bandura, and in 1961 he was studying one of the most important phenomena in psychology. See, while that woman was throttling that big inflatable clown, there was a child watching her, and after about 10 minutes of observing this clown-beating display, the kid was taken to a room full of fun toys, which were soon taken away, and then the frustrated kid was left alone with Bobo, and Bandura watched what happened. And yeah, what happened was kind of scary. Kids who watched the woman beating the clown were much more likely to mimic her aggression, kicking, punching, throwing, even attempting to maul Bobo with a hammer. But other children who saw an adult playing nicely with a doll or just ignoring it didn't respond the same way in their frustration. Bandura's results may seem predictable now, but in those days they challenged the dominant behaviorist views that we talked about last week. The views that learning is solely about conditioning and association, rewards and punishments. Bandura's research focused on how learning can occur through observing and imitating someone else's behavior. And if that seems obvious to you, you have Bandura to thank for that. His research hastened the evolution of 20th century experimental psychology from pure behaviorism into what we now know as social cognitive learning. While it was closely related to behaviorism, the social cognitive models added profoundly new dimensions to what Skinner and Watson and Pavlov had observed in our feathered and furry friends. In other words, it showed us that just as there is more than one way to beat up a clown, there's more than one way to learn.
Okay, so I had a little trouble turning that off. If you continue to watch it, this first part was just 2 minutes. If you wanted to, there's a review of other parts of learning that are related to the chapter. I'm not taking any questions off of this directly for tests or anything like that, but it's just a nice quick 9-minute review of the different terms and different processes, and it's kind of easy and fun to watch. He's kind of a funny guy. Okay, so here we've got Bandura's social cognitive theory into practice. So here we can do this example together. Nick frequently gets out of his seat and entertains his classmates with humorous remarks. Mr. Lincoln often scolds Nick for his behavior. However, Nick's classmates laugh when Nick makes remarks. The scolding rarely has any impact. Nick continues with his antics. After several days of this, the other boys in the class begin to get out of their seats and make humorous remarks. This is very similar to the, it's kind of the same thing with different questions, right, to the one that we did in class. Why do the other boys begin to misbehave? And next, what does it say about Nick? So we'll go back here Back to the observational learning. Okay, the 4 key processes in observational learning are attention, retention, production, and motivation. So take a look at those. And get back here. So why do you think the other boys begin to misbehave? I'm going to put this back after. So they have learned from observing Nick that such behavior results in reinforcement from the peers. Therefore, they imitate him. And then what does this say about Nick? Anybody? Because the children are more likely to imitate high status models, we might assume that Nick has a high status among his peers. Okay, I'm going to hide these again. Best practices and strategies, effectively using observational learning, using the principles of observational learning in your classroom. Okay, so think about the type of model you present to students, how you behave. You're a high status model, right? So they're going to imitate your behavior, or whether you're behaving, like how you handle a stressful situation. We talked in class about when that boy, when he's goofing off and Mr. Lincoln started yelling at him. So he's modeling how to behave in a stressful situation. Versus if you were to choose to remain calm and positive and handle it in a better manner, then you're demonstrating that type of behavior, right? Demonstrate and teach new behaviors. You can teach your students to be reflective, to think about different creative ways of doing things. Think about ways to use peers as effective models. One of this, you guys suggested that in our class, talking about having students that have particular skills, like become that person, right? Become the tech person, and somebody else can become this person, and sort of put it in a positive role, right? Think about way mentors can be used as models. You can bring mentors into your classroom from the community or from the school. Evaluate which classroom guests will provide good models for students. And consider models students observe on television, videos, and computers. Right? You can sort of stay in touch with the social world or the media of your students and be aware of what models they're attending to. And finally, cognitive behavioral approach. Okay, this is very much about teaching students how to manage their own behavior, how to take charge of their own learning. Everybody, of course, knows the proverb or statement about teaching somebody. You can give somebody a fish and they eat, or you teach them how to fish and now they know how to do that. The same thing with students, right? So emphasis is on getting students to monitor, manage, and regulate their own behavior. Learn the skill of how to do that. Teach them how to change their misconceptions, strengthen coping skills, increase their self-control, and encourage constructive self-regulation. So these are all learning and study skills and coping skills that they can learn and then carry throughout their educational career, throughout their life, to do with everything, right? So self-instructional methods is one that they discuss, and that teaches students to modify their own behavior, such as self-talk strategies. Now, I've seen this in lots of elementary school classrooms. What they're doing is they're teaching students to replace negative self-statements with positive statements, and then they will write it on colorful paper and put it up on the wall so that they can constantly visually see these strategies, right? And what you're doing is you're teaching them to alter what you say to yourself and turn things into a positive. So, for example, this project is impossible. I'm never going to get this done. Now try to flip that around and instead say, this project is huge. I can make a plan to get this done. I can do this, right? Got this. How do you eat an elephant? That's a question that when I was a grad student, my supervisor asked me, feeling overwhelmed with my research, and it was just huge and feeling, crazy amount of work to have to do. And all he said was, how do you eat an elephant? And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is crazy. No, he's like, how do you eat an elephant? The answer, one bite at a time. And it works, right? Whenever I have a huge project that just seems ridiculous and undoable, I just remember one bite at a time. So that's another example. Self-regulatory learning, self-generation and self-monitoring of thoughts, feelings, behaviors in order to reach a goal. So this is about goal setting. They're called, it says SRLs, self-regulated learners. So self-regulated learners do the following things. Self-evaluation, they keep a detailed record of studying, test prep, homework. Okay. They set goals for extending knowledge and sustaining motivation. Like what goals, where do you want to get, how? What rewards am I going to set for myself? Like if I study all this week, then 4 or 5 hours a day and finish this, then on Thursday, I'm going to take a few hours off and go do this or go do that, something you want to do. Are aware of their emotional makeup and have strategies for managing their emotions. You're aware when you start to get stressed and what's the best thing for you to do. So you're really paying attention to how you work. So if you can tell that when you're, maybe you start to get a little bit anxious after studying for a few hours, or your brain starts to get a little bit foggy, then to take a break, go do something that's going to help with that, and then come back with it. Come back to the work. Plan into action. Periodically monitor their progress towards a goal. They kind of check it. Okay, I said I was going to do this, and I said I was going to be here at this point. Where am I? Am I there? Fine-tune or revise their strategies based on the progress that they're making. So if you're behind, then you have to, if they're behind on their goal, let's say they're 3, 4, 5 hours behind, they take a minute. Like, why did that happen? Where did I lose these hours? Have I been procrastinating? Have I been putting this off? Okay, so because now that I'm 4 or 5 hours behind, I need to adjust my study schedule so that I'm reaching my goal on time. Evaluation obstacles that may arise and evaluate. I'm correcting it now because I'll never come back. There we go. Evaluate obstacles that may arise and make the necessary adaptations. So look ahead. You know what's coming up. Okay, so if you know that you're supposed to be studying for the next bunch of days, but it's also your friend's birthday, whatever, Tuesday is your friend's birthday, and you're going to want to go out for dinner, you're going to want to do something. So be realistic, plan your studying around that. So maybe you have to do an extra few hours the day before and give something up. Don't go to the gym that day and give that up so that you can fit your friend's birthday in. All right, so here's a little picture that I found. I like to have visuals. I'm a very visual type person. So here you've got self-regulated learners. You've got the performance phase where you're actually doing it. Well, let's back up. It's cyclical, right? So you can start anywhere. Let's start with forethought. So you look at the task, you set your goals, you've got a plan to get this done. Self-motivation beliefs. You're going to look at your outcome expectations, like how interesting what about your motivation, learning goal orientation. This is sort of like the planning stage and knowing yourself and what you need to do in order to get it done. This is the performance stage where you're actually doing it and you're recording and you're keeping track of things. And then after, this is the self-reflection stage where you do a self-evaluation of what you did, how you did, maybe where you dropped the ball. Notice where you did very well. That's important. and then move forward. Now that you have this information, you can perhaps, going forward, adjust your goal setting a little bit, adjust your strategic planning to incorporate the things that you learned the last time, right? So you're always tweaking your system here. So those are the qualities of a self-regulated learner. Move on. Encouraging students to be self-regulated learners. So gradually guide students to become self-regulated learners, help them with the goal setting, and help them to remember to come back and monitor their progress. Coach them along the process, right? Starting with simple tasks to begin with so that they can learn how to do it, and then you can gradually make it a little bit, encourage them to make it a little bit, use the strategy with bigger tasks. Make the classroom learning experience challenging and interesting, always, so they're not bored and feeling challenged and engaged. Provide tips and thoughts and actions that will help students engage in self-regulation. So have it be a part of the classroom, right? Have it be a part of the conversation each day. Give students opportunities to experience activities that will foster self-evaluation. Model self-regulated learning yourself. And make sure students don't just self-regulate, but combine self-regulations with effective learning strategies. Okay, so that concludes part 2, social cognitive approaches to learning. We looked at Bandura's social cognitive theory. We looked at observational learning and how learning can be, people can learn simply by watching rewards and consequences of other people. We talked about cognitive behavioral approaches and self-evaluation. The book outlines evaluating operant and conditioning and applied behavior analysis. I didn't make slides for those because we've talked about a lot of that and it just seemed a little bit redundant to go there. And then finally, I had this little fun quiz for us to do, not realizing how short an hour and a half is. Normally this course is 3 hours on a Monday, and the second term it was an hour and a half Mondays and Wednesdays. So we didn't get this far. Anyways, you can do this yourself as practice. If you have any questions, you can certainly ask me. You know, you can always ask me in class or after class or on Wednesdays. Come and see me at 2 o'clock. I'm always there. Anyways, this is the end. Let me get back here. This is the end of chapter 7. And I'll see you in the next video.